If you're wondering why we have some blank MIDI tracks floating around, we'll explain that much later. Now let's focus a little bit more on the breakdown and build-up. Now breakdowns are pretty self-explanatory. Parts of the song get stripped away, and then they fade back in, or new ones come in, and they build more anticipation for whatever will come next. In our case, it's the drop. If you want your songs to be longer, you might want to have a breakdown be separate from the build-up, but we're making just a short 3-minute song here, so having the breakdown and the build-up occur at the same time will work. A very important part of build-ups is to have a lot of rising sounds, like that sound effect sweep I showed you earlier, and another great way to do that is to have synths that rise in pitch, like this one that I made. I made this in operator, it's just a couple sine waves and some I made this in operator. It's just 2 sine waves, and then sort of me playing with some curves and making my own oscillator there. Taking those sounds and putting them together. Some people might like to use a saw wave for their build-up noises. It just kind of depends on the sound you're going for. I have this little arpeggiator over here. That's just giving it that stuttery effect. If we turn that off, we just have a more straightforward riser. That works well too, but I like to put the arpeggiator on to give it a more distinct sound. And that little jittery effect creates some more tension, which again works really great for build-ups. And then we've got some reverb just to make the transition into the vocal sample and then into the drop a little bit more smooth. Now let's look at the drop. We're going to go add a locator and we'll call this drop. This drop, like a lot of dubstep songs, has sort of 2 parts to it. This part on 33 and then this one on 49. You might want to add a locator for drop part 1 and drop part 2, but seeing how they're not all too different, I just like to have one locator for drop. I just like to have one locator for the drop in general. Our drop right now sounds like this. Now, I'm not going to go too crazy in depth about explaining what all the basses do, as there's several of them here, and this isn't really a how to make a dubstep song or how to make a dubstep bass video. It's more about constructing the song and then mixing it down. What I will say is that I've added processing to several of the basses. You can see on this one, there's actually no processing. This one was actually resampled. I made the bass in an earlier Ableton instance. I think I actually took this from an earlier song I made and then pitched it up. And this is something that I recommend very heavily when you're making songs, is to take your basses and bounce them down, as very complex sound design can really eat up your CPU and make your computer run slow when you're trying to work. And audio files can be more easy to manage when it comes to volume and cutting up the sounds. Like if you're making a bass with vocoders and a lot of crazy effects going on, there might be a lot of feedback that happens at the end, sort of a weird trail sound, and if you bounce it down to audio, it's easier to remove that. The only real disadvantage to bouncing down your basses into audio is that you lose a lot of control of changing the way they sound, and pitching them up with time stretching can sound kind of weird if you pitch them up too much. Like if I take this bass and I pitch it up to 24, that doesn't sound very good. Although you can actually get some very interesting effects from time stretching if you experiment with it, but I'll put it back at +4 semitones. Let's look at a couple other sounds. We've got this one, has some OTT and some reverb. Just adding some more dimension to the sound. In a lot of my release songs, the processing tends to get a little bit more heavy than this, but for a song that's simple like this, it's not really that necessary.